Polyp works here. So in chapter 1108 and 1109, a old theory of mine has both come true and has been given more context. We now know that there are two types of awakening for Zonens, and a Zoan who has awakened properly, meaning that their mind and body has caught up to abilities, they can not only have their normal awakened state, which I'm going to go on and guess is sort of like that weird variation of the hybrid form, in which they look very similar to what a hybrid form would look like, but they just have the Haragama around them. They have that, but they also can access the sort of ogreish or monstrous transformation that we see in Impel Down with the Jailer Beast, which was the first time we were even introduced to the concept of awakening in accordance to Zonens or Dofus in general, right? So what's interesting about this is that I think Sengoku is the same as Luffy, because both Sengoku and Luffy have human fruits. However, I think like Luffy, Sengoku could not transform initially. What we see him do in Marineford is the ogreish or monstrous transformation. What I mean by that is he does not have a Haragamo. And I think because he's been a Marine for so long, and he is, which I just found out, one of only 2 Marines in the entire organization who have been confirmed to have Conqueror's Haki, it is likely that his mind and body have caught up to his abilities. However, unlike Luffy, because he is not playing the script, he is not living out the legend of what his fruit is, he will never gain a proper awakening. You see, with Nika is a warrior of liberation. He frees people. He puts smiles on people's faces. And that's what Luffy has been doing throughout the entirety of the narrative. All we've been seeing with Luffy is that his mind and body have not yet caught up to his abilities up until Wano. So once that happened, of course, he had a legitimate awakening. However, with Sengoku, in being the human fruit model Daibutsu user, he, in being a former fleet admiral, and being someone who is a dog for the government, is not living to the teachings of Buddha, because in this situation, he is not a promoter of peace. He is a tactician, and thanks to his abilities, he's trying to at least find the path of least resistance in how he coordinates things, which is probably why he has gotten an awakening in the first place, because he is smart, he is intelligent, he is trying to do things in a semi-proper way. But seeing as how he is promoting war and he is promoting violence and being in the Marines, that doesn't really fall in line with the teachings of Buddha. Therefore, he does not awaken. Now, mind you, full disclosure, I am a Westerner. I don't know much about Eastern philosophy or Buddhism, but thanks to using the handy tool known as Google, I have seen that Buddhist teachings strongly oppose the use of violence, analyzing it as a product of greed, hatred, and delusion, which are all things that the world government and One Piece specialize in. They do not like people gaining knowledge. They do not like people rising above their means, and they do not like positivity unless it then translates into something that is beneficial for them. So here we are. You see this too with like Kaido. Kaido is in a worse spot because his fruit, the fish fruit model Azure Dragon, is connected to the myth of the carp jumping over the waterfall to become a dragon. However, in that myth, the carp goes through time and time again, struggle after struggle, in order to accomplish his feat. Kaido, in the narrative, has ultimately given up. He only wants a warrior's defeat. He wants to experience what Whitebeard experienced, death and honor on the battlefield. He doesn't want to assert himself and try to be better than he is. He is lax in his position and only wants one good last fight, which is brilliantly displayed by his introduction, in which he jumps off a sky island only to crash into the earth below. So he is actively doing the opposite of the legend that his fruit is based in. Instead of rising to the tops of a waterfall, he's crashing from the highest height you possibly can in One Piece to the lowest low into the earth. So he's acting in complete opposition to what the nature of his fruit is. Sengoku is in like a weird middle ground, because even though he doesn't actively want war and does things in a way in which there are as least casualties as possible, which is why he is a tactician and why he is given the epithet of Buddha, even though he like literally is a Buddha. But that's a whole thing with Zonens. They have an epithet that kind of goes in accordance with what their fruit is. Don't know what that's about, but anyway, even though he's trying to do that, he's still a instrument of war, which is not what the teachings of the Buddha are about. So, and as long as he's a part of the Marines, he'll never become fully awakened. However, when he was running with Garp and doing things like taking down Shiki, I don't think he was able to awaken back then. What I think what was happening in a very similar case with Luffy, I think he was just a normal human who had a lot of intelligence, because that's most likely a passive ability of the fruit, to just have a higher sense of self. But I think he had a very hard body. So instead of having a body made of rubber like Luffy, I think he had a body made of metal. And that body had the properties of metal without actually being metal. Kind of like in the weird state that Luffy is in. His body is rubber, but he's not actually rubber. It just has the properties of rubber. So in Sengoku's case, seeing as how the Great Buddha is a statue that represents the teachings of Buddha, he had a body of metal, a body of bronze or gold that probably had the properties of bronze or gold without actually being that metal. And then in being that, he just was a really strong and sturdy human for the longest until he became awakened, which probably came about when he discovered he had conquerors, because he, most likely because of his abilities, had a bit more of foresight and could see when he was being duped or used. Therefore, he's not stuck in the same sort of spin cycle that other Marines are, in which they just blindly follow orders and do as what they are told. Kind of like how Aki Inu is in that position now. So that's what I think. I think Sengoku in early parts of his career was just a really tough human because of his abilities. And then once he perhaps gained conquerors or gained more foresight of the world through the people he fought, like Roger and Whitebeard and such, he gained conquerors, and that conquerors led to his awakening. But seeing as how he's not fully against war or ideals of the world government, he'll never fully awaken, because he's trying to do things under the pretense or guise of another person's ideals instead of doing what's actually morally just and morally right. Primarily putting on a white hat that's actually a black hat, because those who employ the Marines are actively against the ideals and good of the people that they are sworn to protect, which is why, as long as he's a part of said organization, he will never fully awaken, because in being a part of the organization, you in part somewhat agree with what they do. Even if they're not all bad, they still do things in ultimately bad faith. And with that being said, give me your thoughts.